The truth. It's scattered, noisy, fractured, broken. Fragments of the truth are found littered everywhere in bits of knowledge we call facts. Yet the facts are no longer clean and pure. Tarnished with opinions, they are skillfully molded to support any convenient truth. So, how do we rise above the haze? How can we part the curtains that obscure our reality? How can we discover our truths, our unblemished view of the world? Well, what if we can work together to recreate our world vision? What would happen if we collectively pick up all the scattered bits of truths around us and fit them together like some grand jigsaw puzzle? What would we discover together? This free course is all about speaking our truths to help one another tackle some of life's fundamental questions. To start the conversation, we use simple approaches to probing and understanding our lives, enriching our everyday experiences. I hope you'll join me on this course. I look forward to seeing you there.
I'll never be the same. Because of you, I'm changed for the better. And I just can't explain what it is you've done to me.
Good morning. Today, I want to talk to you about something that's really near and dear to my heart. It's about getting all of us to truly listen, to truly be there for one another. It's something that I've worked really hard on. I was not really good at. Growing up, I was kind of a bully, listening to people all the time, just so that I can argue with them and be right. The same thing happened. I did it with my father. I did it with friends. I was always really good at making people feel um, not good about themselves. And I was smarter. I was better. I was able to articulate my points in a way that they couldn't argue with. And as I grew up, I started realizing that my world was empty. My world was hollow because it was just filled with my ideas, my thoughts. I didn't have anyone else's opinions, anyone else's perspectives to launch into into my world to help fill my world with new views. As we know, and when you read my book, if you get a chance to, you'll know that the truth is actually very, very multidimensional, and it always has been. And the concept that we think that somehow truth is one dimensional and is either this or that, doesn't really exist in our world. But apart from all that, it took until my kids came when I was in my early 20s and I started having kids and children in my life. Then all of a sudden, I started to really listen because I could see I was hurting everybody around me by not listening, by not being there, by not, you know, fully paying attention to what was going on. So, with that in mind, I started this process where I was learning how to love. And it's funny, the system that I've developed, where you involve first of all listening, then observing, then validating, and then empowering. The acronym of it is called love because love is extremely powerful, and to me, it's fitting that the actual steps to listen more effectively with others is actually loving them. So to me, it's synonymous with love, and that's why I find that the acronym fits the actual system. The system itself involves four four steps, as you mentioned. The first step is listening, and listening is really, really difficult. It's not something that's simple to do. Listening involves having to sit back and forget what you know. And I know that may or may not make sense, but when we listen, one of the things that takes us away from the moment, one of the things that draws us away from connecting with the other, is what we know, what we think we know. So as we listen, our brain can't help but put things into categories and try to figure things out. It's normal. It's normal. We all do it. But unfortunately, it takes us away from the listener. We can no longer be connected with the listener, and that creates a distance, a space between us. And that space only widens as we start to get into the conversation and they kind of sense that we're not really there. So, ironically, the first thing you've got to do is forget everything you know. So, if you're talking about politics and your friend is either with one party or the next or whatever, you got to forget everything you know about politics, right? To listen. If you're talking about a relationship that they're going through, you got to forget everything you know about relationships. If they're talking about any kind of subject like school or something that they've done in school or whatever, again, you got to forget all you know about school and what are the right or wrong ways, in your opinion, how to do this. And a lot of people go, well, that makes no sense because that means that first of all, I have nothing to offer, right? If I forgot something, and also, um, you know, what now? My brain is like a sponge. It's picking up everything that they're saying, and as a result, I end up becoming less and less who I am. And the point that they're speaking to me for is they want me to be there. They don't want someone else to be there. They want me to be there. So you're telling me to get rid of me and be selfless and just listen to them and be a sponge. How is that supposed to work? How is that supposed to um, allow me to be there for them? And that's a good point. I totally agree with that. And that's why there are 4 stages. And this is just the first stage. So, you'll get a chance to be you, to reconnect with your opinions, your thoughts, your ideas. But the key element to success for any discussion is listening. Because if you cannot understand, truly understand from an experiential level, from a deep down level, what they are going through, there's no way that you have the context, the depth, the understanding that will allow you to best help them with your knowledge, your opinions, your thoughts, right? And as for your brain becoming a sponge, yes, when you rid your brain of thoughts, when you rid your brain of categorizations and everything, you more embrace that person's world, that person's reality. But don't be afraid of that. Don't be afraid of that because, as Gandhi said, he goes, "I will allow the winds of change and different opinions to flood over my house." And I'm paraphrasing here. But I will not let anyone rock my foundations. When you allow others in, when you have the power to basically be able to rid your thoughts, your mind of thoughts, which by the way, I'm still working on, and it's been over 20 years now, right? It's very difficult to do it completely. It's I have not done it. Yeah, you know what I mean? It's very difficult. But as I've improved doing it, I've started to truly connect. And in so doing, I realized I also have a power that I never knew before. I didn't have to litter my mind with thoughts and ideas to defend myself, to stay who I am, to stay the course of who I am, and not be influenced or by everybody else. No, the more that I could control and switch on and off my opinions, switch on and off my thoughts, my judgments, my categorization, switch what I knew on and off, the more power I had in my brain. So therefore, there was no need for me to, you know, litter my brain with thoughts and ideas or try to compartmentalize or understand what people are going through so that I can make sense of it. Don't need to. I already knew what I knew and I'm fine with it. If I'm learning something new from this individual because I've cleared my mind, that is only adding a new experience, a new thought. And I can then later on reflect on it and figure out what I want to do with it. Do I want to incorporate some of the thoughts or not, or whatever it may be? But I am more in control now because I'm able to better listen than I was before. And I'm fully less susceptible to any other thought process or anyone else convincing me of anything, right? And that's the key element. The the power of listening allows us to connect. And individuals that don't feel that we're connecting with their experience, um, the next steps won't work. They just won't work. And we'll talk a little bit about why. So the second stage is observation. So you thought, listening was a little crazy. Well, here we have observing. Observing is really complicated, and it's one that I have a lot of trouble with, right? The second stage. Because in many cases, the message that someone's trying to convey to you is not what they're talking about. I know that sounds crazy, and it is. And it catches me by surprise many times. And I learned it a lot from my kids. It's very difficult, especially for my kids, to speak to me directly about what they want to say. And that's where I gained a lot of knowledge and understanding in this. They would say something, they would react a certain way, but the message is completely different. And while their actions and their verbiage and their words and their accusations towards me and whatever it may be are totally seem illogical on the outset, okay, underneath it, the message was real and was powerful and was important. And when I drizzled down to the message, I was like, wow, okay, well, this makes sense why you're upset with me, or why you're upset with something, or you need something that it's not being fulfilling you. Like, wow, this is a big deal. I need to pay attention to this. But it would sometimes take many conversations to get down to the message. And we would have many, many talks about it. And a lot of times they didn't even know how to convey the message. It's not something that's done on purpose, but it's something that's done simply because they just don't know how to articulate what they're going through. And they're also afraid of articulating truly what's going on in their mind. So they speak about, things that may seem random or, not make logical sense, right? I'm sure many of you parents listening actually can relate to that. So at the end of the day, the only way I was able to kind of clue in whether there was a disconnection between what they were saying and the message was by observing their body language, the way they said it, the intonation, the whether they fiddle their hands, whether they kind of scratch their head, or they're rocking their knees. There was always these little things, and every as you get to know your kids, and your friends and people in your life, you get to kind of sense a little bit about what are those little factors that tells you that, hey, you know what, on the surface, what I'm being told is not exactly everything, right? And it's so powerful and it's so important. I just read a really, really sad story about a TikTok girl who committed suicide. And she was like 18 years old, a really beautiful girl. And their parents seem like really loving parents. And they both, they're traveling, while father's traveling, mother's around. I'm not exactly sure what the story was, but every time her father would ask her how she was doing, she would say, no, I'm amazing. I'm perfectly fine. And I'm sure that everything, all her verbiage, everything, you know, was dot on. Like it's his daughter. He knows his daughter. He knows the verbiage. It's not like some strangers telling him everything's fine. It's his daughter. He knows his daughter, right? How could, on one hand, this girl who's just beginning her life, beginning the prime of her life, have suicidal thoughts and tendencies, And first of all, not share it with the people that means a lot to her, okay? But also not be able to convey any signs or messages that parents could pick up, right? Of course, there were signs. Of course, if they dug deeper, it would have the message would have been there. But it's difficult. It's difficult for them, and I feel for them. I feel so much for those parents because my kids have not, thankfully, not went through anything like that. But they did go through a lot of profound moments in their lives. And guess who was there for them? Not me. I wasn't there for them when they went through some of the hardest moments in their lives as teenagers. And the reason why I wasn't there was that I was just listening and trying to make sense of this kerfuffle that was coming out of their lives. But I wasn't really getting the message. The message was nonverbal. And it's only when I started getting the message, and one phrase my youngest daughter used to say to me was, you just don't get it. And I'm thinking like, wait a second, you know, I got a pretty decent education. I kind of can understand what people are talking about. I work in, cross-functional teams, across franchises. I've got all this experience, and you're telling me, okay, you Miss 16-year-old is telling me that I don't understand what's going on. It makes no sense. The funny thing was, she was right. I didn't understand. And it was difficult. It was difficult because when I realized what the message was, it was so simple. And we'll go through examples of this later on in the course. And I'll be very open with you with some of the examples that happened in my life. They're extremely profound. You'd be thinking like, oh, wow, I can't believe as a father you missed that. How could you possibly let your daughter, go through a depression for 8 months right under your nose, and you had no idea what she was going through. You had no idea how dangerous it was for her. How could you possibly have done that? I did. I wasn't loving. I wasn't listening. I wasn't observing. I wasn't validating. I wasn't empowering. It's not complicated. It had nothing to do with my intentions, my desire. It had nothing to do with the hours and hours of sitting there listening to them talk. It had nothing to do with it because it wasn't effective. It wasn't effective. I never even got to square one because I had my mind flooded with ideas and opinions and judgments and everything while I was listening to them. So it never even got started, right? So my kids were left alone because I wasn't able to listen. And I learned very quickly that I had to shape up in order to be there in their lives because I was going to lose them, right? So the consequences of not loving, of not listening, observing, validating, empowering are pretty serious. They are not some small instances, and hopefully you've never experienced anything like that, like losing your child or going through a period where your child went through something and you had absolutely no idea this was happening right under your nose. I hope no one ever gets that feeling. It's quite. I don't even know what it's like to lose a child. I can't even imagine what that must be like. But I do know what it's like to be absent of my child, even though I'm physically right there with them. And it's a pretty terrible feeling. It's one that I won't forget, I'll be honest. So with that in mind, just so that we understand and we can orient and calibrate ourselves around how significant these steps are. The next step is even harder. It's validating. Now you think, okay, it's so easy to validate. It's fantastic. It's just telling people about how wonderful they are and how great they're doing and like helping them feel good about themselves. That is so not true. Validating is so difficult. It's extremely complicated simply because individuals get validation in different ways. And most individuals will fake getting validated, will fake like, oh yeah, that's fine, that's fine, that's fine, thank you, thank you, thank you for your conversation, everything. But in reality, they got zero validation from you, right? They're just faking it, right? In reality, validation is something you have to feel that they've received. It's not something that can be verbalized. There's no way they can verbalize it. When it's real, the answer you get back is just a flood of emotion. You don't even get verbiage back when it's real. When it's inside, when it just goes in, it's very complicated to get that one point in. And it's in because we have natural defenses. Our defenses that keep out all the negative thoughts and negative ideas and everything also keep out the positive ideas. They keep out all of those things that could make us better, that could make us feel better about ourselves, right? It's non-discriminatory, right? In most cases it's non-discriminatory. We'll talk about that later. But so if you were to validate me, for instance, it's very difficult. I have a very high threshold. I have to have a full understanding that you know exactly what I'm talking about. So you have to be listening at a level that is extremely intense. You have to be observing my every thoughts and understanding my message to its core. Because if you say something that's out of step, my mind is shutting you off. Okay, you're not even going to get to the validate with me. And if in your validation, anything you say, no matter how much you've listened, no matter how much you've observed, no matter how perfect you've been to this point, if you say something, anything that is remotely positive about what I've done, I will cue you out in a second. I will smile. I'll be happy. Thank you. Oh, that's very sweet. Thank you so much. It's wonderful. You've just gone to zero in my books. All right? Gone. Gone. All your hard work. You could be spending hours with me talking. It's over. It's over the minute you give me a compliment. And that's how tricky validating is. It's not that simple, right? Individuals take different validations. I grew up with a lot of critics in my life, starting with my father, who was my first mentor and very avid critic, and going on with different scientists and engineers and powerful people in the world that were my critics. I do not accept compliments. I find them disingenuous, useless. They have no value in my life. I like and enjoy and admire criticism. And so when my kids criticize me, instead of like me walking back or running away, I actually embraced it. I loved it. It's like, hey, this is what I know, you know? Um, so I enjoyed that a lot more. I do enjoy the moments of love. I do enjoy all those things. I'm not making the assumption that I don't enjoy having a balanced thought process. But deep down inside, okay, what really matters to me in a conversation when I'm conversing with someone, I'm trying to learn their perspective and their understanding. I need I need them to be objective and critical. And I don't care if it's bad critical or good critical, constructive criticism, it doesn't matter to me. I can handle it. It's just the way I grew up. So with respect to others, others can handle criticism. They need a positivity. If anything that you're going to say that's going to validate them, it needs to be positive. Always there needs to be this sense of positive, because they build on their strengths, and a lot of people are like that. They build on their strengths, right? And that's fine, and that's wonderful. We are all different, and we all grow and change in different ways. And there are people that quite frankly, they need some kind of validation that's nonverbal. They need just that validation of just being there, of sitting in that experience with them, right? And we change. Sometimes we need the critical, sometimes we need the positive validation, sometimes we need the, just sitting with me validation. There's a whole series of different levels, and we're going to go into a whole course just on validating alone. Of course, each and every one of these segments are a course. But at the end of the day, the the validating is a very tricky creature, and there really is no perfect way to do it. It's unfortunately it's so variable. Sometimes, it changes in the moment with that person. It changes in the experience they're trying to talk to you about. The only way I'm able to do it is trial and error, right? And as I get to know the person that I'm speaking to, their gestures, the message behind the verbiage, that I'm able to listen to them and with an open mind, open heart, and they trust me and they start opening up in ways that they don't normally open up with people. Then and only then can I maybe have a better clue on how to validate them. But even then, sometimes I make a mistake, and then I have to iterate and I have to find another way to validate. And so going back to the discussion when we talked about listen, okay, where you had to rid your mind of thoughts. Validating is where all your mind is in. Like your thoughts are there. You've replugged in your brain. You're assessing. You're examining. You've got everything on. You got every single function of your brain focused. Because the key element is when you work to validate that discussion. When you work to say, you know, um, that what you've done is amazing or what you've done is incredible. When you work to provide that positive input, um, then you want to make sure that that effect is real, that you could feel that somehow it's gone in them. And I'll give you an example. So when I was speaking to my youngest daughter, and I would listen. I was connected. Everything was great. I observed. I saw she was a little nervous about something, and I was fully onto it, and everything was great. And then I get to the validation part, and I say something like, "Oh, you are so incredible and wonderful," and everything like that. And that's it. The conversation was over. And it wasn't like she said something was wrong, or oh, how could you say that to me? Although, with some of my kids that did happen. And I'm surprised because I'm thinking like, hey, I got all the way here, yet how could I get to validation and just fail, right? um, and that's when they sort of like the sort of feedback I got was so variable. It wasn't as obvious. Sometimes the feedback was just, "Oh, okay, yeah, that's awesome." Or other feedbacks was like almost this look of like disappointment in their eyes, and they'd be like, okay. So I would know, I would get a sense that somehow the validation didn't work, and in speaking with them afterwards about the conversation, I would definitely tell like, "Oh well, it was nice to talk to you, but I didn't feel that good about it." Right? And you're like, "What? I worked so hard. Been working decades on this thing and listening, observing, those are hard to begin with. And now I get to the validation phase and finally just poof it. Like it's gone. Like all my hard work." But that is the reality. So I learned to pivot and to iterate with validation because there's a key moment. Think of it, this window opens up after you love and observe, that opens up where you can truly get in there and put and implant a beautiful message that can allow them to grow, that allow them to end a pain, or at least begin to end the pain that they're feeling. And whether it's sitting with them and saying nothing, or complimenting them, or criticizing them constructively, of course, it's difficult. It's difficult. But when I would sit back and listen to my youngest daughter, and she was very difficult to validate, and really observe, and then get to the validation part and go, "You know what? I I feel what you've been through. I don't know it completely, but I feel it. There's no way I can experience it like you can, but it's here, and I'm I'm having a hard time breathing as you're talking at some points. And I know you're nervous. I can see it. But I just want to tell you how proud I am of you. How proud I am that you have the strength to talk to me about this. Just think about it. You know, I'm not an easy person to talk to. And here you are, you know, a 17-year-old sitting there, and you're telling me these things, and you're being vulnerable with me. And I couldn't be more prouder of you than in this moment. And in that moment of validation, that moment of sincerity, that moment of reality, it's where it sinks in. And it's real and it's powerful. And I promise you, it's like magic. It has the power, your words have the power to destroy, and your words have the power to heal. And I promise you, when you use your words to heal, it's extremely powerful. It's existential, but it's hard. It's hard. It's hard to get there. And I certainly have a lot more work to do on my end. So I'm learning with you guys as we're going through these courses, as we're going through the process. I don't pretend to know everything about this because it is just so complicated and so difficult. So now I lead to empower, that final stage. Well, this is the one that's very interesting because ironically, this was what I thought the hardest part about listening to someone was, well, they're talking to me, they're spending all this time, we're going out for dinner or whatever, and they're spending all this time with me, and all they really want is they want this really good input from me. They want this really good, like, sort of experience with me to empower them, to fuel them into the future. Oh, I'm nervous. This is crazy nervous. Like, this is not easy. And so I was always afraid of empower, that point where they look to me and go, okay, so what do you think? Like, oh, no, don't do that to me. Oh, no. Because at that point, no matter what you've done, even if you know the system or not, whether you make it or not. And even with strangers, it's very, it can be very easy to tell. And so I was always worried about it. Ironically, the reason why I was worried about it, because I wasn't focusing on listening in the first place, voiding my mind and truly being there. I wasn't observing, looking for clues as to what their physical clues or what their message was that was not verbally there. And I wasn't validating. I wasn't truly connecting with them and getting them that understanding that I am there. So, of course, when I go to empower them, what does that mean? It means nothing. Even on the surface, if they think that my ideas are okay, it's just a surface idea. It's like, oh yeah, that's kind of interesting. That's an interesting perspective, Malik. That's kind of interesting. Whatever. What a waste of time, right? That's of no value, right? But when I first listen and I connect, and then I observe and I catch on to what the message is, the message behind the words. And then I validate them, but in validating them, in validating their experience and what they're going through, I'm validating my authenticity with them. They all of a sudden will look at me differently. They will look at what I have to say in a different way, if not just for that moment in time. Empower, the easiest step of all. It was the hardest step in my life. It has become the easiest step in listening because it just flows naturally. There is really nothing, no experience. When I've gone through all three stages successfully, empower just comes out. It's just a natural, outcome of my listening, observing, and validating, and being successful at it. So I didn't have to think about, how am I going to talk to my daughter? How am I going to make her feel good about, her experiences. All I had to do was, after validating her experience and her sitting there vulnerable in front of me, all I had to say was, you know what? You got this. I don't lie to you. I never said anything that's either good or bad that could stray you away from who you are. You know that now. So when I tell you this, when I tell you, you got this, it's because you've got this. And all of a sudden, that empowerment, that sort of ability to say, you know what, I've been through this assessment with you. We've lived through this experience together. You know that I know what you're talking about. I could never replace what you're experiencing, but you know that I'm there. And so when after all this assessment, and you trust me that I'm going to be honest, if I tell you you've got this, I promise you that seed will be deeply implanted in them. It will be real. It will have a real and profound effect, and it will change them. I promise that will happen. It will not be an issue. It will be there, and it's truly amazing, because it's that seed. That's when you plant the seed, is in the power phase. But I found that to be the easiest part, because it just naturally grew. It made sense. I knew exactly what to say the minute I reached that moment, and the seeds planted. And every time then I would have conversations with my kids or with people around me, whether it be at work or friends, I could see there was an effect. There was an effect. It was a change. The person that would come to speak to me the next day was not the same person. They didn't have the same fears, the same issues, right? All of a sudden, it started morphing, right? Whereas before, I was having all these conversations for decades, and I always felt like I was like in a record, listening to all this, the same stuff over and over and over and over again. And little did I know that by loving, by listening, observing, validating, empowering, doing it effectively, I was helping my kids and the people around me that mattered, whether they were at work or my friends or at home. I was helping them end their cycles. I wasn't ending it for them. That was their job. But those repetitious pain or issues that they were going through in their lives, I was helping them lift them above it, get out of it. And it's powerful. It's extremely powerful. So I think that there's a lot here to digest, and I apologize putting all of it on you. I've got a bunch of different exercises that you can go through for free. You can listen to a small scenario and then answer what you think is best. And we'll explain that in each of those scenarios. And then as we go through that, we start to see what some of your strengths are. Are your strengths in the listening? Are your strengths in the observing, in the validating, in the empowering? Is it all over, right? We don't know. But we're going to try to identify in this course what are your strengths and how you can build on those strengths. Because that's what helped me. As much as I like criticism and I like, understanding things, it definitely helped me. And it would help a lot of others to find out what they did well, and then to grow from that and to build from that. So I think it's important. For me, it was a little bit of an opposite. It was more like, hey, this is where my weaknesses are, and I had to build from those weaknesses. And if you are like me, well, then you'll read in between the lines. So where you need to work on. But at the end of the day, I think go through these exercises. Please let me know what you think about them. And as I start to put this course out, please log on and click the link to the bottom left of your screen, and you can absolutely sign up. You can get inspirational sort of notes that help me feel good every single day when I read them. So hopefully they help you out, and they can allow us to work together through this process. Because if we get this right, And here's the thing that keeps me up at night. If we get this right, then not only will we be making our world a better place to live in, but we'll be making the world a better place to live in. If you think about it, every single issue that comes about in this world, whether it's political, sociological, environmental, economic, whatever it may be, comes from individuals not loving, not listening, observing, validating, empowering. If we can overcome that, if we can get one step better on how to do that, and we'll never be perfect, I'm certainly not, then we will make this world a better place. We'll make understanding more of the norm. We'll make recognition of one another more of the norm. And that has profound consequences on our society. So don't think of this as a small task. It's a big task. It will affect the people around you. And I'm really excited on going on this journey with you. So thank you very much for listening and hope to see you again. Take care.